Welcome back, everybody, or I should say, welcome back to me. Hi, everyone. I am Janelle Belgrave. I'm an astrologer, acupuncturist, and clairvoyant medium here in New York City, and I am back to discuss the astrology of Ryan Reynolds. If you have been living under a rock, you may have been missing out on the pre-trial deliberations, leakages, thingamajigs, all the stuff, all the news that's been coming out around Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and Justin Baldoni. Now, the last time I was here, I discussed Blake Lively's natal chart and why I felt that as if I was her astrologer. And she came to me for a reading about what's happening in her life right now, what I would say to her. And basically, I said, girl, please stop. Because a lot of her upcoming astrology is looking a little bit hectic and not necessarily victorious in this particular case that she is alleging that the actor, director, producer, I believe, Justin Baldoni, sexually harassed her on set. Now, since I have been gone, a lot of things have been coming out in the press regarding this particular case. Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking back on February 3rd, I believe the lawyers of both teams, Lively and Baldoni, met in Manhattan in front of the judge. It's going to be a federal trial, so there will be no recording of this. We will not be able to see what's happening in the courtroom live, unfortunately. But they did meet up in front of the judge. And at the time, Lively's team was asking for a gag order against Baldoni because his lawyer had basically put up a full timeline plus all of their, I guess, their case, so, all the evidence that they had compiled and the amended filing with text messages, with video clips, with all sorts of stuff, basically refuting Lively's original, I guess, civil rights something or another. I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer and I'm very, very tired. So if I'm fumbling in all the details, please, please forgive me. But basically, there's been kind of like a deluge of information coming out. The judge denied the gag order and then said, listen, you two, if you are not going to play nice, I do not want you kind of deliberating or litigating this in the public eye. And if you do, I'm going to push the trial date up. I don't know how far up he would push it up by if he felt compelled to, but basically, I'm assuming that if he was to do that, it would just give both sides less time to get their case together in order to win it. And so they don't really want that. So that was a threat. I believe Blake at the time had asked the judge that she had wanted him to deny Justin's lawyer. I'm forgetting his last name, but I believe his first name is Brian. Brian Friedman, I believe is his name. I could be wrong. She didn't want him to depose her, and he was like, "That's not how that works. You can't control who deposes you in court." So it's kind of people are thinking like, "Are you afraid of this man? Like, what's going on? Like, this is something that you set into motion." So it's kind of weird that you're like, "I don't want so and so to depose me." Like, okay, girl. Um, and then I believe afterwards Lively's team had requested that the judge give them an extension so they could file their amended filing. I believe they had wanted to have it pushed back to like March 5th, and the judge was like, nah, B. I ain't doing all that. You have until February 17th, actually the 18th, because the 17th of this week was actually a holiday. So he's like, you have until the 18th to put that shit out, and then we're moving forward. So late last night, Blake Lively and her team put out the amended filing at like midnight. Like they waited to the very last minute. And so right now, all over social media, people are combing through this amended filing. And, I've listened to people read it through, and it doesn't seem like there's much else that's come out. I will say this, that before the amended filing, there was a leak of sort. Very suspicious because it was a leak talking about, I believe, three whatchamacallits, what do you call that thing when you basically go to HR and complain about something that happened on set? And but it was heavily redacted, no names, no dates, no nothing. So a lot of people are questioning whether or not those potential filings against Justin Baldoni being inappropriate on set were actually real. We don't know. Here we are. And as of what I've seen so far, people aren't really feeling particularly swayed by what Lively's legal team has put out. Again, there weren't really much receipts the way that Justin Baldoni's filing had put through. Like there's a lot of text messages, there was a lot of emails, there were a lot of like, a full timeline, like describing everything that was happening and putting it against the backdrop of all of these basically like pieces of evidence to say this is what happened. Guys, this is a very Virgo event. Like there's so many Virgos in this joint. I'm tired, but here we are. It's all in the details. I think that's just going to be what this case is about. Like whether or not you have the facts, the material to back up what you're saying, the evidence, which is what Virgo is all about. It's all about sifting and sorting what's real, what's fake, what stays, what goes. And yeah, that's where we are. So I hope my sound is a lot better this time around. I think it is. I can hear myself. I sound loud and clear. I'm very excited about that. It was very frustrating. And away we go. I think we're going to continue with Senor Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds was born, what, October 23rd, 1976 at 4:30 a.m. in Vancouver, Canada. Now, we have to take, I believe, this birth time with a grain of salt, but if it is accurate, Ryan Reynolds is a 23-degree Virgo rising, and he has the sun and the moon in Scorpio. Let me put a little spotlight on it so you can follow me along. So Virgo rising, Sun, Moon, Uranus, and Mars, and the North Node all in Scorpio. Now, if you don't see right away, you can notice that Ryan Reynolds was born on an eclipse, maybe within hours of an eclipse. Like this is tight. Like he was born right during a solar eclipse. Typically, people who are born on the eclipse tend to have pretty, noticeable lives because eclipses get our attention. We notice when, the shadow of the earth is blocking out the moon or the sun, whatever is going on, we tend to see it. So people who are born in the eclipses tend to have very notable lives for whatever reason, right? I remember one of my favorite astrologers, Anne Ortley, telling me that people who are born on the eclipse tend to be taken out really suddenly. Like life just kind of whoop, takes them away someplace else. Like the fates are involved very heavily in their lives, and that's because of the lunar nodes, right? So I think that has been accurate for Ryan Reynolds. I think he has had or has built for himself a very prominent life. He's very notable now at this time in his career. He has been an actor since at least 1991, I believe. So he has been in the industry for what, 34 years at this point in time. So, he's a dude who's basically built his life and has created quite a bit of success for himself. So, congrats to him. But a little bit about this third house, which we'll get to in a second, but just the planets involved. The Sun conjunct the North Node is typically talking about someone who has the potential of having a large ego, very confident, strong, popular, powerful, famous, right? But it could also be showing signs of egotism and tyranny. All right. The moon with the North Node tends to talk about success with women, nurturing forces, good wives, many contacts, success with the public, and public careers, acquisitive, greedy, hoarding, mental troubles, and food cravings. All right. So, because the North Node is kind of amplifying and energizing these two, or, solar deities, right? It's the sun and the moon, the lunars. I'm not even saying that, guys. I am so tired. I apologize. I'm talking gibberish, but you get what I'm saying. The sun and the moon are very, very important. They are the luminaries in the sky. So, when the node is with them, they are amplified and energized. Also, with these two planets, are Uranus and Mars. So Uranus tends to bring a little bit of instability, and Mars can sometimes bring a little bit of anger. His Mars is pretty strong. In fact, his Mars is the strongest planet in his chart. So this house, his third house, is fairly blessed to an extent, depending how you want to take it. It's powerful. It has the ability to do a lot, and we have seen that in his life. I think I mentioned the last time about the third house, that the third house is often very much overlooked when it comes to creativity. We see a lot to do with writing, communication, yes, but also dexterity and all the ways in which we can communicate a message using our entire body, whether it's playing an instrument, typing on the typewriter, singing, dancing, any kind of expression. Is coming through the third house. So the fact that Ryan Reynolds has made a life for himself, basically doing that, right? He has become a communicator through the arts. He writes, he acts. I'm sure he's done production work, all sorts of third house activities he has gotten into, and has done it in a very powerful fashion. The fact that it's now 34 years into his career, and here he is, like basically an A-lister. Now, I would think for a young man who grew up in Vancouver, Canada, with working class parents, I would think this is a great feat for him. So, congratulations to him. He's really gone a long way with his chart, and I think that's promise to him with this energy. I am concerned sometimes about this Mars Uranus because this can show a little bit of like erratic energy. And it is the third house, so I think, I don't want to diagnose anybody, but I would be a little bit concerned with him in terms of his mental well-being. I'm sure he's a creative genius, especially with Uranus down here, but Uranus could also bring a little bit of instability to somebody, right? Sudden tempers, or maybe he was raised around people who had a sudden temper, not knowing which way the wind was going to blow and how someone's going to respond. And I do think in interviews, he described his father as being that kind of person, which would, make sense. The sun is also involved in this conjunction. This would be a stellium, and the moon too. So I really do wonder what it was like for him as a young person, a young child, growing up with this kind of chart dynamic. Now, I did a little bit of digging around in Ryan Reynolds, history, just a touch, just to, see what's going on because with all this third house energy, it is also squared to Saturn. Now, Saturn is not making a direct square by degree, but he is making a square by sign. And so for all of this creativity and genius and communication skills, there is this level of maybe it wasn't necessarily appreciated when he was young. And he had to really fight to get over this fear of not being, I guess, loved for being this way. Now, when I went digging into his background, I learned that Ryan is the youngest son of four boys. And I was like, oh, because the third house also has connotations with siblings. And so this would be a very martial, masculine experience of, your siblings potentially, especially with Mars being so strong, right? And you're the youngest boy of four sons. And on top of it, his father was a police officer. So I was just like, huh, I'm starting to kind of see a picture developing for him. And what I was kind of getting was this idea of like, his chart is split pretty evenly between feminine and masculine signs. He's a Virgo rising. So Virgo and Scorpio and Taurus are all feminine signs, more receptive, a little bit more yin, a little bit more gentle to an extent, not necessarily forceful or, go get them, right? The other half is masculine. Saturn, Pluto, Mercury, Venus, and Neptune are all masculine signs. So he's split pretty 50-50, but I think in his overall presentation, this is a sensitive kid. For all of Scorpio's martial ways, it's not Aries martial, right? It's Scorpio martial. It's a little bit more quiet. It's a little bit more reserved. It's a little bit more intense. There is a great reserve of energy that's not so expressive, a little bit more secretive, a little bit more quiet and watchful, suspicious, healing factor, which is so funny because the character that's made him super famous is a character that self-heals and regenerates and comes back to life over and over and over again. Like that is the epitome of Scorpio energy. That's wild. And this is how literal Scorpio, this is how literal astrology can be, where you as a massive Scorpio stellium is playing a character that regenerates and comes back to life over and over and over again, like the Phoenix, which is one of the symbols of Scorpio. But anyway, so I was just like, huh, interesting. You're the youngest boy, and then you have the Saturn in Leo in the 12th house, and it's just kind of crushing all of this kind of inventive, creative, expressive energy. And your dad's a cop, and you're the youngest son. And I was just like, I would imagine that in a house full of boys and your dad's a cop, it's not probably the most gentle of households. I would imagine there would have either could have been some rough housing or really heavy teasing, possibly. Like, you know how boys can be with each other. Like they can be a little bit rough. They can be a little bit unrelenting in the teasing and the mocking. And if it wasn't that, it could have been a household that was super under the thumb of the father figure where you don't want to make a peep unless you might upset dad or be on the receiving end of his rage. And then I came to find out that two of his brothers also became cops. And I was just like, huh, interesting. So I can only imagine what the environment would have been like for young Ryan Reynolds, where here he is in the future, he's going to become an actor and a very powerful actor at that, but an actor. And I don't know how well received that would have been by a father figure like that and by three older brothers, right? And he did get into the business pretty young, but I'm wondering if there was any resistance to him following that path. Like, why don't you follow something more practical, more manly? Who wants to be an actor? You know what I mean? Like, can actors even make money? You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if that was the conversation. That was just something that I was looking at, like, I'm not sure. And I really wonder what it was like with his mother too, with the moon being down here. Like, how did she feel being in a household with four sons and a husband? Like, was she thrilled about it? Like, she's showing up as a Scorpio moon, which isn't necessarily the easiest placement for the moon to be in, right? Were her needs being met? Did she feel seen? Like, what was going on down there? So I have a theory that in order to survive in that environment, Ryan had to develop some very specific skills. And I think a lot of it has to do with this Mars Uranus in the third house, which is like you may not be the strongest of the bunch, you may not be the biggest of the bunch, but you're the smartest. You're the most witty. You're the most funny. This could be the beginning of some of the witty humor that he's known for. And it's funny because Scorpio has connotations with sarcasm, right? It's like a biting, cutting way of being funny, where you kind of can slice your enemies with your humor. And I think that's been the overall like theme of him and his style of comedy is just like it's, it's a little bit rough. It's a little bit harsh. And I think we've seen that especially with him in the role of Deadpool. Now, I have a Mars and Scorpio too. I like sarcasm, but in doses, right? I don't do it all the time. I don't know if I wouldn't call myself a huge fan of his work, like in small batches. I didn't really care for the last film. It wasn't my cup of tea just because it was kind of overly that for me. All right. But with this chart dynamic, I think that's why he's developed that kind of style of humor, because it might have been a defense mechanism, right? Mars is a sign of, the planet of action, of battle, of war, of the warrior. But it's not, like I said, it's not an overt war. It's a secret war. It's a covert warrior. It's someone who's a ninja. It's like you won't see me coming. You won't know that I'm killing you softly with my words, right? You may not be smart enough to catch on to the fact that I'm undoing you bit by bit with every word that I say, right? But I'm clever. And I really do wonder if that cleverness came out of a sense of survival. Just a thought. And you guys can let me know in the comments what you think. It's just something that stood out to me, right? That said, I do think there's a tremendous amount of pressure that he feels to succeed. Now, there's something else that came up that I've seen in some clips around him was that it seems as though he had a kind of a difficult relationship with his dad. Again, if your dad's a cop and you're an artist, remember, Ryan was born in 76, so he would have been born and raised from like the late 70s into like what, the very early 90s. You know, we talk a lot about toxic masculinity and stuff like that. Like the masculinity of those time periods is very different, right? There wasn't a lot of leeway for expression if you were a man or a boy, right? Without potentially enduring some level of ridicule if you didn't follow the script, all right? I'm not saying that's the case for him, but it does come to mind. So I really do wonder if he kind of felt a level of rejection, um, possibly from his father figure and possibly his brothers too. You know, if you're so different, you may not fit in. You may not feel like you'll ever get the respect or love that you deserve. And so it becomes kind of like a engine, a fuel of like, I'm going to prove to you that I am worthy of your attention. I'm worthy of your affection. I'm smart. I'm powerful. I'm going to make the most money. I'm going to be the most famous. Like all of this drive could have been driven from a place of insecurity. And I do think that's something that we're hearing quite a bit around him and Blake Lively. Like there could be this deeper insecurity that's driving both of them to make the choices that they're making. And now that they have all this wealth and fame at their disposal and all these powerful friends, I'm not sure if it's encouraging the best behavior in them per se. Again, I don't know. It's a theory, but it's definitely something that's come to mind. What else about his chart did I notice? All right, let's talk about Mars with the North Node. So very successful campaigns, ambitions achieved, given leadership, assertive, wins battles, achieves wealth through enterprise, right? And we've seen that with Justin. It's not Justin, fucking Ryan. I don't know why I keep flipping their names. Ryan, right? So not only is he a successful actor, but he's basically flipped that money into other ventures. He has, I believe, a cell phone company. Was it Mint Mobile? He also has I believe, a soccer team, I think in Wales or the UK. And he probably has other ventures. I think he has a marketing company too. So, for all that we talk about Taurus being the sign with all the money, Scorpio too knows how to turn a dollar into a couple more. Right? It has a very keen idea about what people want and need, and it likes to capitalize upon that. So even if his acting career was to come to an end, I do not believe that Ryan Reynolds would ever really be wanting for money. But I really do think this comes from this level of genius and ambition and drive that he has. Now, the more negative qualities of Mars with the North Node would be, let's see, what do we got here? Selfishness, cruelty, being insensitive and overbearing, ruthless, pursues goals and ambitions at any cost. Hyperactive. But a lot of those themes is coming to mind for me is the Five of Swords in tarot. If you ever seen the tarot card for the Five of Swords, it's like this dude is holding like two swords in his hands and like three more in the ground, and two people are walking away from him in defeat, and he's like laughing, but it's kind of like a hollow victory because yeah, you beat them, but you can't even like really enjoy the fruits of your win because you can't manage it. Like it's kind of like you've won, but it's come at a cost, and it might be something that you don't see right away. And I wonder if that's what we're seeing right now with Ryan Reynolds. It's just like, I'm going to win at all costs. In reality, he might be better off pumping the brakes versus pursuing this the way that he's pursuing it right now. Anyway, Uranus with the North Node, sudden events, inspiration, exceptional genius, intense, unusual powers and gifts, brilliant, creative, and inventive powers. Like I said, very creative person. I know he dabbles in lots of different things creatively. It has gotten him to where he is right now. So, hats off to him. The fact that it's in the sign of Scorpio, it's a fixed sign, so there is this level of longevity, right? He has spent the last 34 years of his life building this career, and now he's enjoying the fruits of his labor. And that's not by accident. This was not a fluke. He was very committed to his task and to his campaign to be successful. But I'm sure he's probably made some enemies along the way, which happens a lot in these kind of businesses. For all of the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, it is a ruthless environment. And I think this case is really exposing just how down and dirty people get in this field. And it's like, ugh, like for all the glitz and glamour and pretty stuff that you guys produce, like this is how y'all behave. Oh my God. But I think we've known that a long time about Hollywood. There is this quote unquote seedy underbelly to the industry that I think a lot of people are becoming turned off to because it's just like, I don't know, there's so much going on in the world. Is this what we're doing? My God. Moving on. What else? So back to that Saturn square to Mars. That would be the tightest square of this situation. It can be conflict with, I believe, authority figures, with men, with the father figure, because sometimes Saturn can represent our father figures. I really do wonder, because this Saturn is in the 12th house, how distant his dad might have felt towards him. Right. Maybe he was really looking for this love and affection and involvement. But, if you're a cop and you're working long hours, if you've risen kind of far up in the ranks and you're trying to raise a family, you may not have time and space to really give a lot of time and affection and love. And maybe it comes across as kind of harsh. I know he had mentioned that his dad was a little bit of a, un, unexpected temper. You never know which side you're going to get. It is in the sign of Leo. This is not an easy position for Saturn. Oftentimes, these people are very talented and creative, but they may not feel able to express it. There might be fears around this. So, if he told a story of his dad was a smothered creative or an artist who never got the chance to be an artist and decided to go down the route of law enforcement, like that would make sense. And I would think there's some level of isolation and distance as well. And I think for Ryan, he might also have periods of time where he wants to be alone, possibly to be creative, but maybe just feel like I need to be isolated because there are feelings of insecurity and unworthiness that comes up for him, potentially. All right. Let's see. Sometimes people with the Saturn Mars square, like he has, kind of have a thing about trying to do whatever or are against whatever they're trying to do, or the men and the people, the authority figures in his life are always against them, right? Blocking your action. Saturn is the challenge, Saturn is the block, Mars is the action and activity, and Saturn says, pump the brakes, stop what you're doing. So there can be some frustration, right? I'm really, really, really curious, like I said, about what it would have been like for him to have gone off to Hollywood and whether or not it was done with the blessing of his father. Because at a later point, I think most recently in the lead up to the films being released over the summer, which was Deadpool and Wolverine, and also It Ends With Us, he kind of made some snarky comments about his dad, who passed away a number of years ago. I think his dad passed in like 2015, which I was also thinking like, ooh, if you have daddy issues, which I suspect he might have, and rightfully so, right, for many different reasons. And, you might have felt like, in my dad's eyes, I am not successful. I am not worthy. I am not enough. Like, and so I am driven to prove myself to him and to show him how great I am and to finally get his approval and respect and affection. It would occur to me like if his father passed in 2015, Deadpool didn't blow up until the following year. And if you have angst and anger with your dad and he has the nerve to pass away the year before your greatest success, I'd be furious. I'd be mad. I'd be like, how dare you? How dare you deny me the right of showing you just how good I am? How dare you deny me the opportunity to see you tell me to my face how proud of me that you are? Right? Rage. I'd be furious. I'd be so mad. And so some of the snarky comments about his dad, I was just like, there's some stuff coming up around that might need to be resolved sooner than later for him. Okay. I really do think so. So, this is all speculation. This is all my thoughts and ideas. These are just charts, right? There are lots of people who are born with similar charts to this who do not have the same life, obviously. But I'm just seeing some themes here that are probably playing into some of the drama that we're seeing right now. That's all. So very, very busy third house, talented, right? And that's backed up again by the fact that he also has Mercury in the second house. So the way that he makes his money is through those skills of being witty, being clever, being communicative, being a writer, being a creative, being an editor, like all of those mercurial expressive things he has done well with. Pluto is also in this house, so the potential for big money is definitely there. And again, just very curious for all of this tension in his chart. He has a very beautiful Venus Neptune conjunction. It's loose, but it's there. And it's in his fourth house. And it made me wonder if maybe it was his mother who was able to kind of soften some of the blow of being in a household like that, where maybe she was the one who introduced him to the arts, or someone introduced him to the arts, and that was a big part of him finding peace at home, and probably still a big piece of him finding a sense of solace in his home base and able to like relax into the creativity. Very often I see Venus Neptune, Venus Jupiter, Jupiter Neptune dynamics in the charts of artists, and he has it in both ways. He has Venus Neptune, and he also has Jupiter Venus, because Jupiter is across, it's out of sign, but it's 1 degree away from Gemini and it's opposite to Venus. So he is a talented, creative person. All right. Like, I know he's not for everybody, he's not everyone's cup of tea. And that's fair. But I don't think he got to where he got to out of nowhere. I don't think he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He's not Blake. Blake comes from an acting family and a family who has lineage in the entertainment business. He did not have that. So I do think that he got to where he was basically from hard work and some level of merit. And I'm definitely of the belief that to an extent, a lot of actors tend to pick roles that allow them to express their charts more clearly. That's why I said a role like Deadpool, or I think there's another role that he played, which is Van Wilder. You know, people say, oh, he plays the same character over and over again. Yeah, he probably is. Because that's what his chart wants. That's what his chart feels drawn to. It allows him to express all of this Scorpio biting humor and sarcasm and defensiveness in a way that makes him money. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? Like, if you were given the opportunity to make great money just being who you are, you didn't have to try that hard, wouldn't you take it? I mean, I don't know. I think some of us would, and I think some of us would be drawn to something else, but that would be in the chart too, right? So, all right. Anything else? Mercury, Pluto can definitely be seen as manipulation with words, right? With Blake, we saw it as, she had a Mercury Neptune. So I talked about, a little bit of, magical words, aka sometimes there can be some lying, or there could be a great opportunity for poetry and songwriting and beautifying of the words. Mercury Pluto is more like sales, copy editing, great writing, social commentary. Words are controlled or used to control others, which I'm wondering about. In what ways is he using his words to control the narrative that we're seeing right now in the news? And I don't know if it's going to plan for him, honestly. Let's see. Moon Uranus, like we said before, willful behavior, lightning changes in moods. Like I said, it might be both parents for him that were a little bit woohoo. And it happens, right? Flightiness, like it's not easy being a parent. It's not easy raising children. I can only imagine what it was would have been like in a household like that with 4 young boys underneath you all the time. Maybe there was some mood swings going on. Touchy behavior, very sensitive to perceived slights, uncompromising, rejection of help from others can be a thing, wanting to be very independent. Let's see, dramatic changes in the home as well, since the moon can definitely talk about the home as well. Alienation, separation from others, comfortable living on one's own. Hmm, curious. We'll see if that comes into fruition for him coming up soon. Moon Mars, domestic discord. So maybe there could have been some fighting potentially for him in the house. Again, that perceiving of threats, the threat of discord would have been very prominent too. So again, I think between these two being so martial, their perception is I'm a hammer, everything's a nail. Everything's a fight. Even the way that they speak to each other, the way that Blake and Ryan talk about how they interact and communicate with each other, they're constantly bantering. Now, I'm not against banter. I like banter too. I like jokes too. I think it's a nice thing to be able to joke with your loved one, especially your spouse. But I'd be worried if the only way that you can communicate is like digging at each other. Like, I think after a while that can become tiring. And I'm wondering if, depending on how they do it, if it's gotten to the point where it's very hard to be vulnerable and open with one another because we're always in a state of defensiveness and waiting for the next blow to land and wondering in what way do I need to get back at this person with an equally witty, phrase or joke or, whatever. And it's Mars is not Venus. And again, they are Martian people, so maybe that does feel loving to them, but I also wonder if it could be a little bit exhausting too. All right. Let's see. Anything else? Very brave, touchy, volatile, sensitive. Yeah, I think that kind of gives somewhat of the lay of the land. I think it's fascinating that both of them, both Blake and Ryan, have Jupiter in the ninth house. I think they have been fairly successful in the realm of television, radio, film, broadcasting, podcasting, disseminating information. It is in the sign of Taurus for him, which is the sign ruled by Venus. So he's had a lot of luck with disseminating art into the world, right? I do wonder if this is going to also be having luck with propaganda basically. I think that's what's been happening lately in the news is like there's been so much narrative shaping coming from the Lively team. I don't know. Is it going to be successful? I mean, his Jupiter doesn't have a lot of dignity. It's high in the chart, which is nice, but it's out of sect. It may not be as positive as it could be for him. I'm wondering if this can be taking it too far, where it's a little bit too much on the nose. I do think he's been running into some of that because most recently, Saturday Night Live, SNL, recently celebrated 50 years on the air since 1975. And they had this big, to do kind of variety show. Da, da, da. I didn't watch it, but he and Blake were there. And he kind of made a joke with the help of Tina Fey and I believe Amy Poehler that kind of rubbed people a little bit on the wrong way because it felt very much like, why are you joking about this? Like if we're talking about your wife being in a legal battle over potential sexual harassment or assault on set, why are we making jokes about that? Like there's nothing particularly funny about that topic, so what are we doing here? And I think a lot of people are just like, that's weird. Like, if this is such a serious thing and you're so offended by it to the point that you guys are going to court, why are you mocking this? There's nothing about this topic that's worth mocking. I don't know. So I'm very curious if he's going to be landing in some level of hot water because he's overdoing it. Jupiter can be a little bit of an overdoer. He can take things too far if he's not careful. And so, the other thing that's been happening in Ryan's chart, we're gonna get to some transits too, but I really do think that Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively are trying to flaunt their power or flex their power and be associated with powerful figures as if to say, even if we're in the wrong, even if we are not right about this, maybe if we've hurt someone, it doesn't matter because we have power, we have money, we have powerful friends, and so therefore, who's going to stop us? And I just don't know if that's landing well right now with people. I think people are feeling a little bit tired of powerful, wealthy people getting away with things just because they're powerful and they're wealthy. So I don't think they're hitting the chord that they need to strike in this situation, honestly. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. I think we're going to go to some transits. And so very often in the charts of people who are going through things, especially if they're partnered, married in a family unit, very often you're going to see similarities between the two charts in terms of their transits and what's happening in their charts. So looking at Blake's chart, we saw a lot of seventh house stuff. We saw some eighth house stuff. We saw some ninth house stuff. We saw some Pluto. We saw some Saturn. We saw a whole bunch of stuff saying like, which is why I was like, girl, I don't know. Maybe don't do this. I don't think it's gonna land right, right? And I kind of feel the same way about Ryan. So the first thing that I notice is that Pluto has officially entered into his sixth house for good. It's in the sign of Aquarius. I think this might have a lot to do with, yes, his physical health, the work that he does on a daily basis, but also potentially the people that he works with in terms of his employees, his subordinates. There have been some rumblings about his previous interactions on other sets. I think there was a director of the first Deadpool who doesn't have a lot of kind words to say about him because he basically alleges that Ryan stole his film from underneath of him. And I'm like, okay, that's a possibility. But what I was concerned about too is that Pluto right now, let's do some annotations real quick. Pluto in Aquarius is making a square to his sun, and it's also making a square to his north node, and it's also making a square to his moon, all at the same time, right? And it's eventually going to meet up with this Uranus and Mars, okay? And it's eventually going to oppose Saturn too in the 12th house, right? So this Pluto has a lot of work coming through. And I think I might have spoke about Pluto the last time in the last video where I was like, Pluto wants you to look underneath the hood, to look underneath the carpet at all of the muck that you have underneath, um, just being toxic and unhealthy for you. A lot of your patterns that you have, you know, kind of taken on throughout your life to live and to cope and to get through. It works for a while, and then Pluto comes through and says, uh, we need to fix this. We need to heal this because it's not going to help you going forward. And so, very often, Pluto is that change, transform, evolve, let things go, let things die, or else you might die, or a version of your life is going to die if you're unwilling to make these changes to heal these dynamics in your life, right? And we already spoke about a lot of Ryan's Scorpio third house activity. There's a lot going on in there. And I'm sure not all of it is the best for him. Yes, it has gotten him to where he is, but there might be some things in this house that needs to be purged, that needs to be healed, that needs to be transformed and evolved into a higher octave of itself, right? I would think a lot of us are trying to quote unquote evolve in life and become better versions of ourselves. And so Pluto has a very big part in helping that happen. So right now, the fact that all of this is happening while Pluto is squaring his luminaries and his nodes, like he's being offered a choice. Very often when a planet is in between the nodes, right? So Ryan has the nodes in South Node Taurus, North Node in Scorpio, right? Pluto is right in between right now. And when a planet is in between the nodes, you're being offered a choice. Which way do you want to go? Okay. One of these ways are going to help you evolve and become a better person. Okay. Um, I don't know which way he needs to go because very often there is a belief that the North Node is the only way to go. I'm like, oh, not necessarily. This is about balance, right? When you think about when you think about Taurus and Scorpio. Taurus is consuming, eating, indulging, enjoying the flavors, the taste, the beauty, the sensuality, right? And Scorpio is releasing, it's pooping it out. It's the waste. It's the less than pleasantness too, right? Those things, you can't consume and consume and consume and not release, right? You would explode. Now, I don't know exactly how this is playing out in his life. I'm very curious. I'm wondering again, I mentioned earlier, I am concerned for his mental health, possibly with this. That third house can definitely talk about a very busy, constantly going mind. Again, that has given him that genius, that Uranus, that moon, that North Node, the sun, the Mars, very quick mind, very witty, very smart, very creative. Like it's brilliance, right? I'm not gonna knock him for that. Like that's what he has. But if you're constantly going, you have no peace. If you have no peace, right? The peace is in Taurus. The peace is in Taurus. Like, are you able to rest? Are you able to relax? Are you enjoying the fruits of your labor? Are you enjoying your life, right? Are you taking care of your physical body? Are you doing these things? Because if you aren't, it could become a deeper issue. And I do wonder if Pluto is going to be like, maybe you need to relax. Maybe you need to take a step back. This could also bring up some health related issues too, I think, if he's not careful. It is in the sixth house. So if he started to develop some nervous tension, it's Aquarius, the nerves, right? I believe the spinal cord is associated with Leo too, some heart related stuff. Like all of that could be a part of this equation. So Pluto square the sun, feeling drained, power struggles and crises that test your strength and your control over yourself, which is a big part of Scorpio. Self-control, holding it together, holding on to things, being, possessive. It could also be being controlling, which has been something that has been coming up a lot around Ryan Reynolds, and people are alluding to the fact that he might be a controlling partner, right? They're bringing up old videos and songs from Alanis Morissette and Scarlett Johansson. And, they're alluding to the fact that he was not willing to be flexible, that he wanted to be the one in control, in power, the best, the star of the show. And it really broke down their relationships, right? Maybe that's why he got with Blake Lively. She's beautiful. I'm sure she's talented, but is she an A-lister? I personally don't think so. I don't think she has the same star power as Alanis Morissette or Scarlett Johansson, which is might be why he chose to be with her. So it's like, she's beautiful. She looked good on my arm. We'd kind of be a power couple, but at the end of the day, I would be the star of the show, right? I would control what happens. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, a lot of speculation going on about what's going on here, but you know, I would hate for it to be true that, this is him trying to sabotage her career so that she stays home. Like, wouldn't that be terrible? But is it out of the question with this chart? I can't say no. I can't. I'm not saying it is like this is definitely happening, but I can't say it's off the table. Like, no, not. Well, yeah. Maybe it's possible. Pluto square the moon, fears and angry emotions come out to play. It's a great time to get into therapy. Okay? Because Pluto will be dredging that moon, be like, let's look at all these emotions you got going on here that you don't want to talk about, that you suppress and kind of hold on to very tightly because you're afraid of them and what they would mean if they ever came out to the surface. And you're like, no, Pluto, I don't want to. Oh my God. Right? Intense experiences in personal and emotional life. I would say this is what's happening. It's very intense and emotional. Right? I'm being sued for $400 million. That's intense. My brand that I've built over the last 3 decades is under threat. That's intense. This could ruin a lot of what I've built. Yeah, I'm feeling this emotionally. How am I sleeping at night? And a lot of people were talking about how he looked at the SNL awards. I'm like, he looked a little bit frazzled, a little bit tired. Blake looked great. Looked like she had a little bit of work done recently, but he was looking a little bit just a little bit tough around the eyes, like just like, what have I gotten myself into? Right? Let's see. Power struggles and family tensions can arise as well with the Pluto square the moon. Who knows what's going on in their household, right? Now that they're officially embroiled and it does not seem like they want to back down, which is the other thing. That could be that Martian element. We never say die. Goonies never say die. I think a lot of people are like, why don't they just settle? This doesn't look good. Why would you want to take it this far? Right? And they're like they're calling in the cavalry. Like he's been seen with very powerful people, like the CEO of Disney and the CEO of this person, Ari Emanuel. Ari Emanuel, the brother of Rahm Emanuel. Ari Emanuel is probably best known for the character Ari Gold from Entourage. Now, if you've never seen Entourage, it's an early 2000s HBO sitcom that I used to really enjoy. I don't know if it still holds up today because again, this is 20 years ago and the humor is very very very, kind of brash. Probably edges on the side of misogynistic because it's talking about a young actor who does an indie movie that, is a breakout movie. And it gets him a lot of attention and praise. And so he's from Queens, New York. Yeah, Queens, New York. He's from Queens, New York, and he's going to go out to Hollywood, but he decides to bring his best guy friends with him as his entourage to help him navigate his experience in California. And so chaos ensues. Ari Gold, aka Ari Emanuel, is his agent, who is one of the most bullying, aggressive, just wild character. Hilarious. If you watch it, you'll laugh, but he is a wild character. And it's probably what helps him to be so successful is because there's no stopping him. And maybe at some other point we'll look at Ari's chart, but I was just like, this is the dude you're bringing into the equation? Ari Gold? So that basically means like we're not backing down. You don't bring Ari Gold into a situation to play nice. That's the last person you bring into the equation. You just don't. Like there's no this there, no. That's war. That's like I'm committing to the battle. And so he made some interesting comments. He kind of disparaged Justin Baldoni, made fun of his name. It was, very schoolboy, like I said, entourage-ish kind of humor. It's just like this is what we're doing. I don't know how this is gonna play out. I really, really don't. I'm not. I don't think so. Anyway, Pluto square to Mars. Strength increased for achieving goals. Caution against sickness. All right. You do have to be mindful about that. It is in the sixth house. It is squaring Mars. The third house, mental health, sixth house, physical health, 12th house, like psycho-emotional health. His health houses are, they're up for grabs. Enemies and disagreements may be harmful, selfishness, resistance to advice. Yeah. Or taking bad advice. Unnecessary risk and anger. Fight for positive, beneficial change for others, right? So if he's doing this from an altruistic place, like fighting on behalf of his wife, maybe this is going to work out. But since he was making jokes about this, I'm not too sure if that's what's happening here. I don't know if he's fighting on behalf of Blake's honor. I don't, I'm not getting that right now, personally. I'm very blessed to have never really have been sexually assaulted or abused in any way, but the few things I've come across, whether it's really aggressive catcalling on the street and being harassed on the street, or there was one time on the train many, many years ago, crowded subway train, and this dude, most times when you're on a crowded train in New York City, people say, excuse me, and you have to step out the way to help them get off the train, especially in rush hour. It's packed. Like, you're like sardines in there. In this particular case, this dude made it a point because it was me and like three other women by the door. He made it a point to like touch us as much as possible on the way out, and it was disgusting. And we all noticed it. Like we were all like, what the? Like we were like ready to beat him down on the way out because of the way that he was touching us. Like we knew it was inappropriate, right? To this day, I forgot about that, but when I thought, like, yeah, that stuff still makes me mad. I hated that. Like it made me feel so gross. I felt disgusting afterwards. Like someone touched me against my will without my consent. So I really find it hard to believe that you're making jokes about that, sir. Just weird. Anyway, the next thing that we have going on in this chart, aside from Pluto going through the sixth house, is going to be Saturn. Saturn is in his seventh house. So we spoke about Saturn the last time in terms of challenges and delays and blockages and rising to the occasion under pressure. And we spoke about the seventh house too, right? It can be about our relationships, it can be about our partner, it can be about our business relationships, any kind of one-on-one contact. It can also be talking about our open enemies. Okay, so Saturn is here, Neptune is here. So Saturn could be talking about challenges through the marriage and partnerships, possible divorces, open enemies. Rewards are given for the last 7 to 14 years, so we'll see how that plays out for him. There could be also some notable success, but it could also be attracting some jealousy. And our partners can be envious of our success in here too. Okay. So, I really do wonder about the dynamic between him and Blake. because she has spent the last decade of her life giving birth to all these children and not really being able to build her career, while Justin has had huge success over the last 10 years, you know, I'm very curious if she feels like my husband's an A-list, my best friend is an A-lister, and I'm A-list by association, but I may not be A-list on my own. And that might be a point of contention, especially if Ryan Reynolds is controlling. Is he blocking her from going out and working? Is it like, oh, the babies, the children, this, that, and the other, blah, 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 you should stay home. I make enough for all of us. So why do you want to, right? But if she's driven to be successful in her own right, and remember in her chart, she has a desire to make money. She wants to make her own money. That's a big deal for her. But if you have a spouse who's not really collaborating with you or supporting you in that, I could imagine it could become something not great in the relationship where there's resentment building up and envy building up. Like, why do you get to have the highest grossing film of the year and I don't get to have that? And it makes me think about how they promoted this film and the fact that he was in head his I think his advertising company or his marketing company, I think it was what Massive Effect or something like that, was in control of the marketing and they were getting lambasted for it because why are you marketing alcohol and hair care products for a film about domestic violence? Right? Is that, I mean, for someone who's savvy in business, for him to make that choice or for them to make that choice seems a little bit weird, right? And then for her to be upset that people were, weren't receptive to that style of marketing. So it's like, of course not. Alcohol is a huge accelerant for domestic violence. Hello? Right? Like who's thinking about shampoo when you're talking about your partner potentially abusing you? Grab your florals. Florals for what? My potential funeral? Like what are we talking about? You know what I mean? So it's like very tone deaf. So I wouldn't be surprised if Saturn's bringing out some of that. Both of these planets are going to be going into the eighth house. Let's see. Neptune going through the eighth house. You have to be mindful of your partners, mindful of your business contacts. You have to take off the rose-colored glasses as well. Address any unresolved marital issues and business resentments. Thinking about all his past projects. Do people view him well in the aftermath of all that? Do they have good things to say? I'm not saying you need to be everyone's best friend, right? Unfortunately, when you're in this industry, you have to crack a couple of eggs to make an omelet. But if you're smashing everybody and being reckless with everybody and being careless and callous and cruel and, being really aggressively Martian, like we spoke about with that Mars, being ruthless, being cutthroat, that can come back and haunt him. And of course, it's all opposite to his ascendant too. So this could be a big challenge for him. With Neptune going through the eighth house when it moves into Aries in the springtime, I believe that's going to be, when is that going to be? At the end of March, March 30th. Neptune dips into Aries for a little while. We might see, issues around the joint resources and the finances and confusion around what that money, where that money's going, how it's being spent, partnership resources, maxing out our credit cards possibly to deal with all of this legal issues, lack of responsibility around money, and maybe even money taken without his knowledge, right? So he has to be mindful of that as well. And then when Saturn moves into the eighth house, and I believe that's going to be at the end of May. Let's see, May 24th is when Saturn moves into Aries. There, again, disputes around those shared resources. It might be harder for him to come across credit. His partner's income might be a little bit challenged as well, possibly. Um, People may not want to be, associated with them, unfortunately, right? I don't know. I might leave it here. There's still more that I can talk about, but I don't know if I want to. Let me know. I'm not sure if there's anything else I want to say. I mean, thus far it's looking a little bit dicey for Ryan, just like it is looking like for Blake. And like I said, that's often the case when a couple is going through something together. You're going to see it mirrored at the same time in each other's charts because you're going through it together. And let me know if you want me to look at their composite chart, their the chart of their relationship as a couple. Because even in that chart, when I was looking, I was just like, there's no escaping. Saturn is coming for them there too. So I really do not think that this is going to end well for them. Now, I will say this as a closer. Even though on its face, this astrology looks a particular way, and I am very much of the opinion that I just don't see it ending well. There are two things. One is that we have an eclipse coming up. The first eclipse in Virgo and Pisces. It's going to be at 23 degrees of Virgo Pisces. And that is landing exactly on Ryan Reynolds' ascendant and descendant. It's also hitting his midheaven. It's also hitting his IC. Like all the angles are taking on that eclipse on March 14th. And even he's an eclipse baby, so he's no stranger to eclipses and what they bring about. But when an eclipse lands so directly on your angles or a particular planet, you feel it. And so if we are already in the wind up towards that, right? We're just under a month, 3 weeks away from these eclipses as of today. Today's February 19th. If this is the energy that we're heading into and it's not changing, if this is what it's gonna be, and people are just like, I don't know, this feels weird. I don't know how I feel about him. I don't know if I'm gonna watch any more of his films. Like, this is just weird. I don't know. I don't know if this eclipse is going to be helpful. If anything, it's pointing to some significant changes in pretty much all the aspects of his life. Him through his first house, his family through his fourth house, his relationships and partnerships through his seventh house, and his career, his status, his image, and his 10th house. Like these areas of his life are taking direct hits from those eclipses. And it's an immutable sign, and mutable eclipses, they kind of go back and forth and they have a very unusual pattern. So this might be something that kind of lingers a while going forward for him. All right. The other thing that I noticed is that his Virgo rising and his Gemini midheaven, both of these are ruled by Mercury, right? Mercury at some point in time is going to be dealing with Saturn. Not now, probably maybe around 2027, most likely. The end of 2020, 2026, probably 2027 is when this Mercury is really going to be contending with Saturn, but it's there. And then the ruler, the seventh house and the fourth house ruler, they're both ruled by Jupiter. And who's coming to Jupiter fairly soon? Uranus, right? So the upheaval, the change, that tower moment, the lightning bolts being sent down from the heavens, being like, boop, change, shake it up. You're too comfortable. You've gotten a little bit too complacent. Here's some shock and awe to kind of shake you up out of your apathy and your feelings of having everything under control, right? And that would directly influence his home life and his relationship. So there's a couple of things in this chart where I'm like, I don't know, Sarah. Like your wife, I would, if I was your astrologer, I would tell you to stop right now. Do not go any further with this because I just don't know if this is going to go the way that you want it to. Now, this is what I wanted to say before. The thing is that we're living in an age where people with power and money are very much flaunting it in a way of like, I can do whatever I want. Who's going to check me? And unfortunately, because of our current political environment and the people who are running this country, especially in the US, that is probably going to be a theme going forward where the rule of law may not stand up the way that it needs to, right? We might see a fair amount of injustice going on because of money and power and influence and who's connected to who and who's rubbing whose shoulder and who's greasing whose palms and money under the table, that kind of like, ugh, right? But the problem is that that's for a very small select group of people who gets to do that. For everybody else who's watching, who's not a part of that elite group, they're very likely to be disgusted, right? And angry. And so even if they manage to get away with this because they're friends with Ari Emanuel and they're friends with the CEOs of all the streaming platforms and they're friends with all of the biggest and brightest of Hollywood and everyone's rich and wealthy and they can bribe the judges and pay people off to lie and do all sorts of crazy stuff. The people who are the fans and the people who have been funding them through being their fans and paying for their art, they might be so disgusted and turned off that they completely turn away or turn against them. Because remember, we're no longer in Pluto in Capricorn anymore. It's Pluto in Aquarius. And the people are just a little bit tired of the nonsense. They're tired of things not being equitable. They're tired of worshiping the kings and the queens, right? The president, oh God, this man just talked about I'm king, right? He's really pushing for this authoritarian kind of dynamic. And so I just don't know how that's going to fly with Pluto being in Aquarius. I just I think it's really dicey. I think that's a risk that may not play out the way that he think it will. I don't know if him rubbing shoulders with Ari Gold and so is making anyone feel particularly great about him. If anything, they're just like, oh, like who cares about that? Is this what you guys did? If you did say sorry, move on, but don't pretend like you're just gonna steamroll this person because you can. Like that looks really bad, right? But alas, he might choose to do so anyway, and we'll have to wait and see because at this point in time, it does not appear as though they want to back down. So, yeah, that's that. Tell me what you think. Leave some comments below. I would love to know what your thoughts are on this chart. The next chart up is going to be Justin Baldoni, and then I think I do a short little clip about all the different other players who are like the side characters, like Colleen Hoover and Ari Emanuel, and like whoever else is kind of in the periphery of this, because I'm seeing a theme that a lot of them have a lot of planets in common. Especially Virgo, which is very interesting because the South Node is in Virgo now. So I think some people are going to really learn that there's some stuff they have to give up doing in order to progress in their life. And they may not want to, and that might come with some issues. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening. I really had a good time with this chart. I hope you did too. Like I said, comment below. If you're interested in a reading with me, I do those too. I do natal charts, I do solar return charts, I do composite charts. I love helping people figure out what is going on with their life. I think astrology is a great confirmation tool. It just lets us know that we're not crazy, right? We're not, what's happening in our life is being reflected in the heavens, and that's important to know, and that everything's a cycle, everything has its purpose. And I love to talk about that and help people out. And yeah, I would love to see you. Please drop a comment, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share this video, and I will see you soon. Peace. Have a good one. Bye.